Hello, my friend. Tonight we stand beneath a sky filled with quiet stars as a cool wind carries the scent of wood smoke across sleeping fields. Somewhere beyond the darkness, church bells fade into silence, while distant villages settle into another ordinary evening. Yet tonight is not ordinary at all. Across Europe, unseen by the people already asleep in their cottages, an idea has begun to move from one heart to another. It is invisible yet powerful enough to send hundreds of thousands of people walking toward lands they have never seen. You're about to follow that extraordinary journey, from its uncertain beginning to its astonishing conclusion. You will walk beside knights, monks, pilgrims, merchants, farmers, and rulers who all believe they're stepping into history even though none of them knows how their story will truly end. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Before we begin our long journey together, I would love to know where you're listening from and what your local time is. It is always fascinating to imagine people from every corner of the world relaxing together beneath the same night sky. Now it's time to rest. For a moment it feels as though you're standing in Western Europe during the closing years of the 11th century. The air smells of damp earth after recent rain. Oxen sleep inside wooden barns. Candles flicker behind tiny windows. Nothing about the peaceful countryside suggests that an event is about to reshape the lives of countless families. Europe itself is changing. Great forests still cover much of the land, yet new villages appear every year. Stone churches rise where older wooden chapels once stood. Markets grow busier. Roads become more crowded, lords build stronger castles while farmers clear fresh fields with heavy iron ploughs. Records confirm that population growth accelerated during this period, giving many regions more mouths to feed than ever before. Life remains difficult. Most people never travel farther than a day's walk from where they were born. News moves no faster than a horse can carry it. Rumours travel even faster, changing slightly with every storyteller who repeats them beside a fireplace or inside a crowded marketplace. Religion shapes nearly every part of daily existence. Church bells divide the hours. Festivals mark the seasons. Priests bless newborn children, marriages, harvests, and burials. Heaven feels wonderfully close while eternal punishment seems just one careless mistake away. Every decision carries spiritual weight. Oddly enough, many people also collect remarkable stories about distant lands that sound almost unbelievable. Some travellers describe cities whose walls shine beneath the sun. Others insist they have seen deserts stretching farther than the eye can follow. A curious footnote from later chroniclers even suggests that some villagers imagine the Eastern world filled with astonishing creatures alongside ordinary people. Whether anyone truly believed every tale remains uncertain, but such stories certainly fueled curiosity. Far beyond the villages of France, England, and the German lands lies Jerusalem. Even those who have never seen a map know its name. It is spoken during prayers, sung in hymns, and remembered through countless sermons. Pilgrims dream of reaching its sacred places at least once before they die. For generations, many pilgrims have managed exactly that. The journey is long and dangerous, but not impossible. Different rulers have controlled the city over the centuries, and although conditions often change, travel has usually remained possible in one form or another. Yet news arriving from the east becomes increasingly troubling. Travellers return with stories of violence, unstable roads, and growing uncertainty. Some accounts are certainly exaggerated, others may be entirely accurate. No agreement has been reached on whether every alarming report reflected widespread reality or isolated incidents repeated until they sounded universal. Even so, fear spreads much more quickly than careful investigation. Meanwhile, another powerful force reshapes the Eastern world. New military rulers expand across lands once governed by older dynasties. Kingdoms rise and fall with astonishing speed. Fortresses change hands, alliances appear strong one season and collapse the next. The political landscape becomes so complicated that even experienced diplomats struggle to understand every shifting relationship. Back in Europe, another struggle quietly unfolds. Kings, princes, and church leaders compete for influence. Powerful nobles command private armies. Bishops oversee both spiritual and worldly affairs. Some rulers sincerely cooperate with the church, while others argue fiercely over authority. One council decree proves that church leaders increasingly sought to guide not only religious practice, but also the conduct of rulers and warriors. Violence between rival nobles had become such a familiar feature of life that repeated efforts were made to limit when fighting could legally occur. Whether these efforts always succeeded is another matter entirely. You begin noticing how ordinary people react to all this uncertainty. Farmers hope simply for peaceful harvests. Merchants want safer roads for trade. Younger sons of noble families wonder whether they will ever inherit land of their own. Monks spend long hours copying sacred books while praying for stability across Christendom. Then whispers begin crossing the countryside. An emperor far to the east has reportedly requested military assistance from Western Christians. The request is practical. Experienced soldiers are needed against dangerous enemies pressing upon imperial territory. Yet, as every messenger repeats the story, details slowly change. Practical assistance gradually transforms into something much larger inside people's imaginations. In your ears, the echo changes into excited conversations inside castle halls. Noble families gather around fireplaces discussing distant opportunities. Priests speak with growing urgency. Pilgrims wonder whether ancient holy places might soon become easier to reach. Nobody yet realizes how enormous the coming movement will become. Among church leaders, one remarkable figure prepares for a gathering that history will never forget. He is determined, intelligent, and convinced that Europe needs both unity and purpose. Rather than allowing knights to fight one another endlessly, perhaps their strength can be directed elsewhere. Scholars bicker over exactly how much planning had already occurred before the famous public appeal that followed. Some argue the speech reflected years of careful preparation. Others believe events developed more rapidly than later writers suggested. Whatever the truth, momentum was already building beneath the surface. As autumn settles across the countryside, roads fill with travellers heading toward an important council. Bishops arrive wearing heavy robes. Noblemen ride beneath colourful banners. Servants unpack wagons loaded with supplies. Ordinary townspeople gather simply to watch such an extraordinary assembly. The crisp morning air carries the smell of horses, fresh bread, damp wool, and wood smoke. Voices rise above the crowd. Expectations grow with every passing hour. You stand quietly among them, unaware that you're about to witness words that will send thousands upon thousands of people towards one of history's most famous campaigns. The peaceful fields around you seem almost too calm for such a turning point. Soon the call will be given. And once it is spoken, the world you have known until now will never look quite the same again. The crowd waits beneath an open sky as the cool air carries the scent of trampled grass, horse sweat and smoke drifting from hundreds of cooking fires. Around you, bishops speak quietly with nobles while merchants weave between travellers selling bread, dried fish and watered wine. Everyone senses that something unusual is about to happen. Even the restless horses seem strangely calm. Then the gathering falls silent. A respected church leader steps forward to address the assembled crowd. His words carry across the field with remarkable confidence. He speaks about distant holy places, about fellow Christians living under pressure, and about the need for unity after generations of conflict across Europe. Rather than allowing knights to spill one another's blood, he urges them to direct their courage toward a common purpose. The speech lasts only a short time compared with the centuries of history that surround it, yet its effects prove astonishing. Later writers describe listeners weeping openly. Others claim men immediately promised to take the journey. Some stories became more dramatic with each generation of retelling. Records confirm that the appeal itself inspired an extraordinary response. Although historians continue debating the precise wording because no single version survives exactly as it was spoken, what matters most is not every sentence but the result. An idea suddenly becomes a movement. Your mind drifts across the following weeks as roads fill with travellers moving in every direction. Messengers ride from castle to castle, priests repeat the appeal inside churches, monks copy letters describing the great expedition now taking shape. Villagers gather after evening prayers to discuss whether anyone they know might actually leave. Many do. Some are powerful lords with shining armour, experienced soldiers and wagons loaded with supplies. Others possess almost nothing beyond a walking staff, a blanket and deep conviction. Families sell property to finance the journey. Noble women manage estates while husbands prepare for departure. Blacksmiths work late into the night repairing helmets, swords, horseshoes and wagon wheels. A council decree proves that participants receive spiritual privileges intended to encourage commitment. For many believers, this promise carries enormous emotional weight. The expedition is not viewed simply as another military campaign. It becomes a deeply personal act of devotion. Of course, practical motives also exist. A younger noble without inheritance may see opportunity. A merchant imagines new trade routes. A knight hopes to gain honour after years of local feuds. Human motives are rarely simple, and this great movement reflects every possible mixture of faith, ambition, fear, hope, and curiosity. One scandalous aside appears in several medieval accounts describing men who allegedly mortgaged vineyards, sold livestock, or even exchanged valuable family heirlooms at surprisingly low prices simply to gather enough money for equipment. Whether every colourful example is accurate remains uncertain, yet financial sacrifice clearly became widespread. You notice preparations unfolding everywhere. Tailors sew heavier cloaks for uncertain climates. Carpenters strengthen wagons. Leather workers repair saddles. Millers grind extra flour. Monasteries prepare food for travellers passing through. Entire villages pause their ordinary routines to watch departing neighbours disappear along dusty roads. The excitement is contagious. Even children pretend to be crusaders during games, waving wooden sticks as imaginary swords, while parents watch with mixed pride and quiet worry. Not everyone welcomes the movement. Some elderly farmers wonder who will harvest fields if so many young men leave. Mothers fear they may never see sons again. Wise rulers quietly calculate the enormous economic burden of sending thousands away for years. Livestock still require tending, taxes still need collecting, castles still demand defenders. Arguments split along different lines regarding how carefully the expedition had truly been organised at this early stage. Some scholars believe enthusiasm greatly exceeded logistical planning. Others suggest experienced leaders already understood many practical requirements. Whatever the case, no medieval kingdom had ever attempted anything on such an enormous scale. You begin meeting several remarkable personalities whose decisions will shape the journey ahead. There are seasoned commanders known for courage in battle. There are ambitious princes eager to increase their reputation. There are deeply religious bishops determined to guide both body and soul. Each arrives with followers carrying distinctive banners fluttering above long columns of marching people. Yet perhaps the most fascinating travellers are the ordinary ones. You walk beside farmers who have never crossed a mountain range. You share campfires with craftsmen who have never seen the sea. You hear conversations between elderly pilgrims hoping to pray in Jerusalem before death finally claims them. Every face carries a different reason for walking east. The roads become increasingly crowded. At dawn, thousands rise together as mist hangs over open fields. Fires are rekindled, bread is divided, water skins are filled, horses stamp impatiently, priests offer prayers before another long day begins. The sound is unforgettable. Leather boots against dirt, wooden wagon wheels creaking, harness chains gently clinking, children laughing despite exhaustion, dogs barking somewhere near the rear of the column. The expedition already resembles a moving town more than an army. Records confirm that medieval military campaigns depended heavily upon enormous numbers of non-combatants. Servants, cooks, blacksmiths, merchants, clergy and family members often accompanied fighting men. Without such support, even the strongest knights could accomplish very little. Food quickly becomes everyone's greatest concern. Every loaf matters. Every barrel matters. Every healthy horse matters. You soon appreciate how difficult medieval travel truly is. Roads vanish into muddy tracks. Bridges collapse unexpectedly. Rivers swell after heavy rain. A broken wagon axle can delay dozens of people. Sick animals threaten the entire supply chain. Oddly enough, some travellers carry tiny souvenirs from home. A carved wooden cross, a smooth stone collected from a favourite stream, a small piece of cloth embroidered by a mother or wife. Such humble objects weigh almost nothing, yet they provide comfort during lonely evenings beneath unfamiliar stars. As winter slowly loosens its grip, the great departure gathers unstoppable momentum. Behind every traveller lies a familiar home growing smaller with every mile. Ahead stretches an unknown world filled with mountain, foreign languages, powerful kingdoms, dangerous roads, and promises that seem almost too extraordinary to believe. You pause one final time before leaving the lands you know best. Church bells ring softly in the distance. Smoke rises peacefully from village chimneys. Fields shimmer beneath gentle sunlight. Many who walk away today will never return, yet none of them can see the hardships waiting beyond the horizon. The true test of their resolve has not even begun. Morning mist hangs low above the fields as your long procession continues eastward. The air smells of damp soil, fresh bread pulled from village ovens, and smoke from campfires that have only just faded into grey ash. Boots sink into muddy roads softened by recent rain. Wagon wheels groan. Horses snort impatiently. Everything seems to be moving, yet the great expedition has barely begun. Then something unexpected happens. Not everyone is willing to wait for the carefully organised armies. Long before the principal nobles finish gathering their forces, enormous crowds of ordinary people decide they should leave immediately. Some believe that every day's delay dishonours the sacred mission. Others assume the journey will be easier than it truly is. Rumours spread faster than reason, and enthusiasm proves far more abundant than preparation. Your mind drifts through villages where entire families abandon their homes together. Fathers carry farming tools instead of proper weapons. Mothers balance bundles of clothing while guiding frightened children along unfamiliar roads. Elderly pilgrims lean upon wooden staffs with remarkable determination. Mixed among them are adventurous young men carrying little more than hunting knives and endless optimism. Records confirm that this early wave contained far more civilians than trained soldiers. Many had almost no military experience. Their confidence rested largely upon faith and hope, rather than discipline or organisation. At first, the atmosphere feels almost festive. Travellers sing while marching. Children chase one another through roadside meadows. Farmers share bread with strangers. Priests offer blessings at every stop. The roads become crowded with people convinced that history is unfolding beneath their feet. Yet beneath the excitement, serious problems quietly multiply. Food disappears much faster than expected. Water becomes scarce in heavily travelled regions. Villages suddenly face thousands of hungry visitors instead of a few passing pilgrims. Local supplies vanish almost overnight. Friendly welcomes slowly transform into uneasy negotiations. One curious footnote survives from later chroniclers describing how some travellers became so convinced that every large town might secretly be Jerusalem that they repeatedly asked whether their destination had already been reached. Whether every such story is completely accurate remains uncertain, yet it illustrates how unfamiliar geography remained for many ordinary medieval people. You begin noticing growing tension. Some travellers insist on moving faster. Others can barely continue. Arguments break out over supplies, campsites, and leadership. The cheerful songs heard during the first weeks become less frequent. Dust settles heavily upon clothing that no longer looks new. Boots begin falling apart. Horses grow thinner. For a moment it feels as though enthusiasm alone is trying to carry thousands of exhausted bodies across an entire continent. Among these early travellers emerges a charismatic preacher whose powerful sermons inspire remarkable devotion. Crowds gather wherever he speaks. People believe his words because he seems completely certain that success awaits. Modern historians continue discussing exactly how much influence individual preachers exercised compared with the broader movement already sweeping Europe. No agreement has been reached on the balance between personal leadership and widespread religious excitement. Whatever the answer, passionate voices clearly encouraged many people to depart before proper preparations had been completed. As the growing columns enter unfamiliar territories, discipline weakens further. Local misunderstandings quickly become dangerous. Language barriers complicate simple conversations. Merchants refuse credit. Hungry travellers grow desperate. What begins as isolated disputes occasionally turns into open violence. These incidents stain the movement before its principal armies have even crossed the greatest rivers. One scandalous aside appears in several medieval accounts, describing disputes over livestock that escalated into surprisingly large confrontations. A single missing pig or stolen sack of grain could trigger hours of angry shouting, followed by fighting involving dozens of people. Such stories may sound almost humorous today, but they reveal how fragile order became when thousands struggled to survive together. You continue walking east. The countryside gradually changes. Rolling farmland gives way to steeper hills. Dense forests stretch across distant ridges. Great rivers appear like silver ribbons beneath the afternoon sun. Each crossing requires patience. Boats prove too few. Bridges become crowded. Heavy wagons break wooden planks. Hours pass simply waiting for your turn to reach the opposite bank. Records confirm that river crossings represented some of the greatest logistical challenges facing medieval expeditions. Even peaceful travel could be delayed for days by high water or insufficient ferries. Eventually, the early crusading crowds reach lands ruled by powerful Christian kingdoms whose leaders view the newcomers with increasing concern. These rulers had expected organized military contingents. Instead, they encounter enormous gatherings of poorly supplied pilgrims whose numbers exceed local resources. Hospitality becomes difficult. Markets empty quickly. Fields cannot feed everyone. Officials attempt to guide the crowds onward as rapidly as possible. You sense growing impatience on both sides. The local population fears shortages. The travellers fear abandonment. Neither group fully understands the other's worries. The mood grows heavier with every passing week. In your ears, the cheerful laughter of departing villages has been replaced by quieter sounds. Coughing around smoky fires, wheels needing repair, hungry children asking when food will arrive, priests praying over the sick, armour clinking softly during restless nights. The journey has become far less romantic than anyone imagined. Then the travellers approach territories where powerful enemies wait beyond the frontier. Excitement briefly returns. Many believe the hardest part of the expedition is already behind them. They could not be more mistaken. Without experienced leadership or coordinated strategy, the early armies march into danger they scarcely understand. The result is swift and devastating. Well-organized professional forces easily overwhelm scattered groups that lack disciplined reconnaissance and unified command. Confusion spreads almost instantly. Small victories prove meaningless against coordinated opposition. Courage cannot compensate for poor planning. Records confirm that much of this first wave was destroyed before reaching the ultimate destination. The losses shocked observers throughout Europe and served as a painful lesson for those following behind. Scholars still debate the exact numbers involved because medieval chroniclers often exaggerated both armies and casualties. Yet there is little disagreement about the overall outcome. The premature expedition ended in disaster. News slowly travels west. Families waiting anxiously receive little information. Some never discover precisely where loved ones disappeared. Others cling to uncertain rumours for years. As evening settles across the landscape, you stand beside the fading embers of another campfire. The stars above appear unchanged. The wind still carries the scent of pine forests and cooling earth. Nature remains wonderfully indifferent to human triumph or tragedy. The first great wave has failed, but far behind the true crusading armies are still assembling. Unlike these eager pilgrims, they will march under experienced commanders with stronger discipline, greater resources, and far more careful planning. Their journey is only now beginning. The memory of the failed first wave lingers like smoke after a fire. Around countless evening campfires across Europe, people quietly repeat stories of vanished pilgrims, broken columns and distant battlefields that few can even locate on a map. The excitement has not disappeared, but it has become more cautious. Those now preparing to leave understand that the road ahead demands more than enthusiasm. Your footsteps join a very different procession. This is no wandering crowd held together by hope alone. These are organized armies led by experienced nobles who have spent months gathering men, weapons, horses, engineers, priest servants and supplies. Bright banners sway above disciplined columns. Wagons carry grain tools, spare weapons, tents, and barrels of salted meat. Armour glitters beneath the morning sun instead of appearing as scattered pieces collected from village workshops. Records confirm that several of Western Europe's greatest nobles answered the call, each commanding his own followers while remaining largely independent. No single commander controlled the entire expedition. Instead, several powerful leaders marched side by side, cooperating when necessary, while quietly protecting their own interests. That arrangement seems practical. It will also create problems. For now, however, the journey feels almost orderly. The roads are still crowded, but experienced officers assign campsites before sunset. Guards patrol during the night. Scouts ride ahead, searching for safe crossings and reliable food supplies. Blacksmiths repair damaged horseshoes before they become dangerous. Priests celebrate services beneath simple wooden crosses planted beside the road. The rhythm of travel becomes almost comforting. Wake before sunrise. Pack the camp. March for hours. Pause near midday. Continue until evening. Eat whatever can be found. Sleep beneath unfamiliar stars. Repeat. Your senses slowly adjust to this moving world. The scent of leather becomes as familiar as fresh bread. The steady creak of wagon wheels blends with birdsong. Iron rings softly against iron whenever mounted knights pass nearby. Even silence gains its own character during long stretches across empty countryside. Soon the great armies reach lands ruled by the Eastern Roman Empire. Its cities immediately feel different from anything you've previously experienced. Stone roads appear wider. Walls rise higher. Churches display unfamiliar architectural styles. Bustling markets overflow with goods arriving from distant regions. Silk hangs beside fine pottery. Bright spices perfume the air. Skilled craftsmen shape glass so clear it almost disappears in sunlight. For a moment it feels as though you have entered another world despite sharing the same faith. Adra. One curious footnote appears in several travel accounts describing Western knights staring in amazement at the wealth displayed inside Eastern cities. Some reportedly wondered whether every household belonged to nobility because the buildings seemed so much grander than those back home. The stories may contain some exaggeration, yet the cultural contrast clearly impressed many visitors. The emperor welcomes the arriving Crusaders politely. He also watches them carefully. His concerns are understandable. Only months earlier, poorly disciplined crowds had created serious difficulties while crossing imperial territory. Now even larger armies approach. They are better organized. They are also heavily armed. No ruler would ignore such a force standing outside his capital. Arguments split along several lines regarding the exact relationship between the emperor and the crusading leaders. Some historians emphasize sincere cooperation against shared enemies. Others highlight mutual suspicion that never completely disappeared. Both interpretations find support in surviving evidence. As negotiations begin, gifts are exchanged. Fine horses, rich fabrics, carefully crafted weapons, food for the arriving armies. Formal ceremonies reinforce mutual respect while private conversations explore military strategy. The emperor requests something important. Any lands once belonging to his empire but recovered during the expedition should be returned to imperial authority. Several crusading leaders agree. Some do so willingly. Others perhaps see the promise as a temporary necessity rather than a lasting commitment. You notice subtle tension beneath the polite smiles. Each side needs the other. Neither side fully trusts the other. Yet practical necessity often succeeds where friendship cannot. Boats begin carrying thousands of Crusaders across the narrow stretch of water separating Europe from Asia. The crossing itself feels strangely peaceful. Seagulls circle overhead. Gentle waves tap against wooden hulls. The shoreline slowly recedes behind you. Ahead lies Asia Minor, where the real campaign will begin. The landscape changes almost immediately. The fertile countryside near the coast gradually gives way to rocky hills, dry plains, and distant mountain ranges, shimmering beneath warm sunlight. Water becomes more precious. Shade grows scarce. Villages stand farther apart. Marching becomes harder. Heavy armor traps heat. Dust settles into every fold of clothing. Water skins empty quickly. Horses require constant attention. Even experienced soldiers begin appreciating how enormous the journey truly is. Records confirm that maintaining supplies across such distances challenged every medieval army. Local foraging helped, but organized logistics remained essential. Without regular food and clean water, even victorious armies could collapse long before reaching battle. Then enemy scouts appear. At first they threaten distant figures upon ridgelines. Then they vanish. Hours later they return somewhere else. They know the terrain. They watch every movement. Their presence reminds everyone that the campaign has entered contested land. One scandalous aside survives from later chroniclers claiming that certain overconfident Western knights initially dismissed these mounted scouts as little more than curious spectators. They soon learned otherwise. Whether every colourful anecdote is perfectly accurate remains uncertain, but underestimating local opponents proved dangerous. You begin noticing how different warfare feels in these open landscapes. Back home, forest castles and rivers shaped every campaign. Here speed matters. Mobility matters. Knowledge of water sources matters. A familiar road can mean survival. A wrong turn can mean disaster. The crusading leaders adapt as best they can. Scouts spread farther ahead. Marching formations tighten. Night watches become stricter. Messages pass constantly between commanders. Experience slowly replaces early confidence. Far behind you, Europe grows more distant with every mile. Ahead waits the first great objective. A powerful, fortified city stands upon the frontier, guarding important roads deeper into the interior. Its capture will determine whether the Crusaders can continue their advance. As evening settles over the camp, cool air finally replaces the day's relentless heat. Campfires flicker across the plain like scattered stars. Armor rests beside sleeping men. Priests offer quiet prayers. Blacksmiths finish repairing dented helmets beneath fading light. Tomorrow the march ends. Tomorrow the first great siege begins. And with it the First Crusade will truly reveal what kind of expedition it is destined to become. Dawn arrives slowly across the broad plain. Pale sunlight spreads over dry grass, scattered rocks, and the countless tents that now cover the landscape. The cool morning air carries the smell of baking bread, horse sweat, damp canvas, and smoke rising from hundreds of cooking fires. Somewhere in the distance, a hammer strikes iron as armor is repaired before another demanding day. You stand among thousands of weary travelers who have marched farther than many ever imagined possible. Ahead rises the first great obstacle. Its walls appear almost part of the landscape itself. High towers overlook every road. Strong gates guard every entrance. Deep defences remind every visitor that cities are not conquered simply because an army wishes them to be. This is the Crusaders' first true test. The excitement that carried everyone across Europe begins giving way to patience. Sieges are slow. They reward endurance more often than bravery. A knight eager for glorious battle soon discovers that waiting can be the hardest task of all. Records confirm that the city had once belonged to the Eastern Roman Empire before changing hands during earlier conflicts. Recovering it therefore held military value as well as political importance. Its position controlled vital routes leading farther into Asia Minor. The army settles into routine. Engineers inspect the surrounding ground. Carpenters begin shaping timber. Soldiers dig defensive trenches. Scouts monitor every road leading toward the city. Messengers ride constantly between commanders. Nothing about siege warfare is simple. Your hands soon become familiar with rough wood and coarse rope rather than polished sword hilts. Even noble knights spend long hours hauling supplies, strengthening camps, or supervising work parties. Victories are often built with shovels before they're secured with swords. Inside the city, defenders prepare just as carefully. Archers patrol the walls. Food is carefully measured. Watchmen scan the horizon from sunrise until darkness. Everyone understands that time itself has become another weapon. For a moment, it feels as though two patient giants simply stare at one another across open ground. Neither side wishes to make the first costly mistake. One curious footnote preserved in medieval writings describes how both armies could sometimes hear one another singing during quiet evenings, when the wind carried sound across the plain. Whether every account is completely reliable remains uncertain, but the image reminds you that both sides consisted of ordinary human beings facing extraordinary circumstances. Life inside the Crusader camp settles into an almost predictable rhythm. Before sunrise, priests gather small groups for prayer. Shortly afterward, cooks prepare simple meals. Blacksmiths sharpen tools instead of weapons. Builders continue constructing siege equipment. Animals require feeding before soldiers think about themselves. There is surprisingly little glamour. Dust settles over everything. Clothing grows stiff with sweat. Boots wear thin against rocky ground. Water must be collected constantly. Even successful days often end with aching muscles rather than celebration. Records confirm that medieval armies depended heavily upon engineers and labourers during prolonged sieges. Magnificent charges by armoured cavalry attracted attention from chroniclers, yet careful construction work frequently determined success long before any final assault. The crusading leaders meet regularly. Although united by a common objective, they remain independent rulers with their own followers, ambitions, and opinions. One commander recommends patience. Another favours aggressive action. A third worries more about supplies than strategy. No agreement comes easily. Scholars continue discussing how much these internal disagreements slowed operations. Some believe the leaders cooperated remarkably well considering their different backgrounds. Others argue that rival ambitions repeatedly complicated otherwise promising opportunities. Like many questions surrounding the First Crusade, the truth probably lies somewhere between complete harmony and constant conflict. As the days pass, the city refuses to surrender. The defenders understand their advantages. Strong walls protect them. Stored food gives them confidence. Messages occasionally slip through surrounding lines requesting outside assistance. The siege quietly becomes a contest of endurance. Your ears gradually learn new sounds. The steady scrape of shovels. The crack of freshly cut timber. The rhythmic pull of ropes lifting heavy beams. The distant call of sentries changing watch. Even silence feels different now, broken only by wind brushing across dry grass. Then scouts bring troubling news. Enemy forces may be approaching to relieve the city. The atmosphere changes immediately. The Crusaders cannot simply focus upon the walls any longer. They must also watch the surrounding countryside. Guards double their patrols. Mounted scouts ride farther from camp. Weapons remain closer at hand. One scandalous aside appears in later chronicles describing arguments over who deserved credit for spotting approaching enemy movements first. Even during moments of genuine danger, pride remained remarkably difficult to set aside. Whether every dramatic disagreement occurred exactly as described is uncertain, but competition among noble leaders certainly existed. The expected relief army eventually appears. Dust rises upon the horizon before soldiers themselves become visible. The defenders inside the city celebrate. The besieging army prepares. This is no longer merely a siege. It is now a race. If the relieving force succeeds, months of effort may collapse in a single day. The crusading commanders respond with unexpected determination. Rather than abandoning the siege, they organize quickly and meet the approaching army before it can fully coordinate with the defenders. Records confirm that this confrontation became an important early victory for the Crusaders. Their success prevented outside forces from breaking the siege and strengthened confidence throughout the expedition. The battle itself passes with frightening speed compared with the long weeks of waiting. Dust clouds fill the air. Orders echo across the field. Mounted knights charge where opportunities appear. Infantry holds steady despite exhaustion. Then gradually resistance weakens. The relieving army withdraws. The city stands alone once more. Inside the walls, hope begins fading. Food grows scarcer. Outside assistance has failed. Every sunrise now reminds the defenders that rescue may never come. Negotiations quietly begin. Not every victory requires another assault. Sometimes words accomplish what weapons cannot. Eventually the gates open. The city changes hands. The Crusaders celebrate their first great success. Yet another important decision immediately follows. In accordance with earlier agreements, control of the city returns to the Eastern Roman Empire rather than remaining under Crusader rule. Records confirm that this transfer fulfilled promises made before the campaign entered Asia Minor, although not every leader viewed the arrangement with equal enthusiasm. As evening settles over the newly captured city, you walk beneath walls that only yesterday seemed impossible to overcome. The breeze carries the scent of fresh bread once more instead of smoke alone. Children cautiously peek from doorways. Merchants reopen small shops. Life begins returning with surprising speed. The road ahead now lies open. Beyond these recovered walls stretches an even harsher landscape filled with heat, thirst, powerful enemies, and challenges greater than any faced so far. The first victory has been won. The hardest journey still waits beyond the horizon. The gates stand open behind you as the newly recovered city slowly settles into an unfamiliar peace. Morning sunlight washes across stone streets that only days ago echoed with anxious footsteps and guarded commands. Bakers once again light their ovens. Merchants cautiously lift wooden shutters. The scent of warm bread begins replacing the lingering smell of smoke that has drifted through the air since the siege began. For a brief moment, everyone allows themselves to breathe. The first great obstacle has fallen. Confidence spreads through the camp. Many begin believing that the hardest part of the expedition is already behind them. History has a habit of humbling such confidence. The crusading leaders gather to discuss the next stage of the campaign. Large maps made from parchment lie across wooden tables inside command tents. Messengers arrive and depart almost without pause. Supplies are counted carefully. Horses are inspected. Every commander understands that the army must keep moving before valuable time slips away. Records confirm that the expedition resumed its march deeper into Asia Minor soon after the successful siege. Remaining stationary carried enormous risks. Food supplies diminished quickly and enemy forces could regroup if given sufficient time. The columns begin moving once more. Armour catches the early sunlight. Hundreds of banners ripple gently in the morning breeze. The endless rhythm of boots, hooves, and wagon wheels returns. Yet something has changed. The army now carries the quiet confidence that comes only after surviving its first major trial. Your mind drifts across the broad plains stretching toward the distant horizon. The landscape feels immense. Dry grasses sway beneath a warm wind. Rocky hills interrupt the otherwise open country. Water is harder to find than anyone would like. Shade becomes a luxury rather than an expectation. Every mile demands patience. Every mile consumes precious food. Every mile wears down both people and animals. One curious footnote from several medieval chronicles describes how experienced local guides often judged the location of hidden water sources simply by observing birds circling in the distance or patches of greener vegetation. Whether every guide possessed such remarkable skill remains uncertain, yet knowledge of the landscape frequently meant the difference between comfort and suffering. The crusading army now faces an enemy that rarely behaves according to Western expectations. Rather than remaining behind walls, mounted warriors appear suddenly upon distant ridges. They watch. They wait. Then they disappear again. Hours later, they emerge somewhere completely different. The constant uncertainty proves exhausting. You begin appreciating how unfamiliar this style of warfare feels. Back in Europe, battles often centered around castles, villages, or fixed positions. Here, movement itself becomes a weapon. Fast horsemen launch arrows before retreating beyond easy pursuit. Heavy cavalry cannot simply chase every distant rider across endless plains. Patience becomes as valuable as courage. Scholars continue debating the precise effectiveness of these mounted tactics against heavily armoured Western knights. Some emphasize the flexibility of Eastern cavalry. Others point toward the Crusaders' remarkable ability to adapt despite unfamiliar conditions. Both perspectives contain important truths. Soon the expected confrontation arrives. Near an important crossroads, enemy forces gather in significant numbers. The Crusaders understand that retreat would expose their marching columns. Advance becomes the only realistic choice. The morning begins quietly enough. A cool breeze passes across the plain. Birds still sing. Campfires burn low behind the advancing lines. Then distant horns echo across the landscape. The battle has begun. Records confirm that this engagement became one of the defining victories of the early campaign. Although surprised by determined resistance, the crusading army maintained discipline under intense pressure before launching a powerful counterattack. At first, arrows darken the sky. They strike shields. They rattle against helmets. Some bury themselves harmlessly in the dry earth. Mounted archers circle constantly searching for weakness. The crusading infantry tightens its formation. Spears remain steady. Shields overlap. No one moves without orders. You can almost hear every heartbeat. Time seems strangely slower. Dust rises beneath countless hooves. The smell of leather sweat and dry grass fills the air. Sunlight flashes across polished helmets. The tension becomes almost unbearable. Then comes the moment everyone has awaited. The armoured knights receive their signal. Heavy horses surge forward together. The ground itself seems to tremble. Long lances lower. Bright banners stream behind them. Years of training, expensive equipment, disciplined formations, and remarkable courage combine into one overwhelming charge. One scandalous aside, preserved by later storytellers, claims that a few overconfident young knights began celebrating before the fighting had fully ended, only to discover fresh enemy attacks appearing unexpectedly from another direction. Whether the anecdote unfolded exactly as described remains uncertain, but medieval commanders repeatedly warned against celebrating too soon. The battle continues longer than anyone expected. Victory does not arrive instantly. Instead, it grows gradually. Enemy attacks lose momentum. The crusading formations remain intact. Counterattacks become stronger. Eventually, the mounted warriors begin withdrawing from the battlefield. The road ahead remains open. Relief spreads through the army. Men who had stood shoulder to shoulder for hours finally relax their grip upon battered shields. Priests offer prayers of thanksgiving. Blacksmiths immediately begin repairing damaged armor. Surgeons move quietly among the wounded. Records confirm that this victory transformed morale throughout the expedition. It demonstrated that disciplined Western forces could defeat formidable opponents even under unfamiliar conditions. Yet triumph carries its own hidden dangers. Success encourages confidence. Confidence sometimes becomes overconfidence. Several leaders now begin thinking beyond simple survival. If these victories continue, who will govern newly conquered lands? Who deserves the greatest glory? Who will be remembered by future generations? Such questions remain unspoken during public ceremonies. Privately, however, ambitions slowly awaken. Arguments split along different lines regarding when rivalry first began influencing strategic decisions. Some historians believe personal ambitions had existed from the beginning. Others argue they intensified only after repeated victories made long-term success appear genuinely possible. As evening settles over the victorious camp, the atmosphere feels almost peaceful. Cooking fires glow beneath a sky filled with brilliant stars. The scent of roasting meat drifts gently through the cool night air. Exhausted soldiers quietly share stories of the day's battle. Some laugh. Some remain silent. Some simply stare into the flames while thinking about home. You notice that everyone seems slightly older than when the journey began. Not because many months have passed, because experience itself has changed them. Ahead lie mountains. Beyond those mountains waits even greater hardship. Long marches, empty landscapes, cities stronger than any yet encountered. The expedition has earned its victories honestly. Soon it will discover just how expensive every future victory will become. The victorious camp slowly disappears behind you as another morning begins. Dew clings briefly to patches of dry grass before the rising sun drinks it away. Horses stamp impatiently while servants tighten saddle straps and load wagons. The smell of smoke from dying campfires mingles with the scent of leather dust and fresh bread baked before dawn. Victory has lifted everyone's spirits, but the road ahead offers no opportunity to celebrate for long. The army marches onward. The familiar rhythm returns once more. Boots pressed into hard earth. Wagons creak beneath heavy loads. Priests walk beside knights. Merchants follow behind with carefully guarded supplies. Children, though fewer now than during the earlier stages of the expedition, still appear among the long columns, reminding everyone that this remarkable journey includes far more than professional soldiers. Gradually, the land itself begins to change. The fertile plains give way to rougher country. Low hills become steep ridges. Dry valleys stretch farther between reliable streams. The comforting shade of scattered trees grows increasingly rare. Every traveller begins measuring the day not by distance alone, but by the next opportunity to refill a water skin. Records confirm that crossing the interior of Asia Minor proved one of the most demanding phases of the First Crusade. Heat-scarce water and long supply lines challenged the expedition almost as severely as enemy armies. For a moment it feels as though nature itself has joined the campaign. The afternoon sun presses heavily upon every helmet. Iron armour becomes painfully hot. Dust clings to sweaty faces until every soldier looks carved from pale brown earth. Even breathing feels slightly more difficult beneath the dry wind. You quickly discover that thirst is an unforgiving companion. Water must be rationed carefully. Horses often drink before people because without horses the army loses its mobility. That practical reality is difficult to accept, yet everyone understands its necessity. One curious footnote appears in several medieval accounts describing experienced veterans placing small pebbles inside their mouths while marching. The practice may have helped reduce the feeling of dryness during long stretches without water. Whether the method truly worked remains uncertain, but such simple techniques reveal how creative exhausted travellers could become. Food also grows scarcer. Fresh bread appears less frequently. Salted meat becomes harder and tougher. Cheese dries beneath the relentless heat. Simple porridge often replaces more satisfying meals. Nobody complains loudly. Everyone knows supplies are limited. Every bite consumed today may mean one less tomorrow. Your ears gradually grow accustomed to different sounds. The cheerful conversations heard earlier in the expedition become quieter. Instead, you hear steady breathing. The occasional cough, harness buckles gently striking against saddles. The distant cry of hawks circling high above the valleys. Silence itself begins feeling heavier, yet the army continues. Discipline holds. Experienced leaders understand that long marches succeed only when every day follows a predictable pattern. Wake before sunrise. Travel during the coolest hours. Rest briefly when the heat becomes overwhelming. Resume marching. Camp before darkness. Repeat again tomorrow. The routine becomes strangely comforting despite the hardship. Records confirm that successful medieval commanders carefully balance speed with endurance. March too slowly and supplies disappear. March too quickly and exhaustion destroys fighting strength long before battle begins. The landscape offers occasional rewards. Hidden springs emerge between rocky hillsides. Small orchards survive beside isolated villages. Wild herbs release pleasant scents when crushed beneath passing boots. At sunset, the distant mountains glow with soft shades of gold and crimson. Beauty still exists even here. Perhaps hardship simply teaches people to notice it more carefully. You meet local villagers whose lives have continued despite the constant movement of armies across their homeland. Some cautiously offer food for payment. Others watch silently from stone doorways. Children peek from behind low walls before disappearing again. Communication remains difficult. Different languages separate people even when peaceful intentions are shared. Simple gestures become more valuable than elaborate speeches. Scholars continue discussing the relationship between local populations and the passing crusading armies. Some evidence points toward cooperation in certain regions. Other sources describe fear, misunderstanding, or conflict. Like most medieval history, the reality probably varied greatly from one valley to the next. Then the weather changes. Clouds gather unexpectedly across the mountains. Cool winds replace the relentless heat. Rain falls in sudden bursts that transform dusty tracks into slippery mud. The relief is welcome. The new difficulties are immediate. Heavy wagons sink into softened ground. Pack animals struggle uphill. Wet clothing clings uncomfortably against tired skin. One scandalous aside preserved in a later chronicle tells of several proud knights becoming thoroughly coated in mud after insisting their expensive horses could easily climb a soaked hillside. The animals disagreed rather dramatically. Whether every humorous detail is true remains uncertain, but medieval roads rarely cared about noble titles. The mountains themselves demand respect. Narrow passes force the long column into tighter formations. Steep cliffs overlook winding paths. Loose stones slide beneath boots. A single broken wagon can delay hundreds of travellers waiting behind it. Scouts become even more important. Every bend in the road might conceal danger. Every ridge requires careful observation. Fortunately, the expected attacks never fully materialise. Whether enemy commanders judged the terrain unsuitable or pursued different priorities remains uncertain. The army continues climbing. Slowly, patiently, one careful step after another. Then, after days of difficult travel, the mountains finally begin yielding to gentler country beyond. Fresh streams appear more frequently. Green fields return. Villages become larger. The change feels almost miraculous. Even the horses seem to notice. Their pace becomes livelier. Their heads lift higher. Campfires that evening burn with renewed optimism. Fresh water fills every container. Simple meals suddenly taste wonderful. Exhausted soldiers laugh again. It is remarkable how quickly hope can return after hardship. Records confirm that despite severe losses from hunger, thirst, disease, and fatigue, the crusading army successfully crossed this difficult region and continued its advance toward northern Syria. Their determination astonished both supporters and opponents alike, yet the hardest military challenge still lies ahead. Far beyond the next range of hills stands one of the greatest fortified cities in the eastern Mediterranean. Its walls are stronger, its defenders are numerous, its supplies are abundant. Its strategic importance cannot be overstated. Many travellers do not yet know its name. Soon they will, and before they can ever hope to reach Jerusalem, they must survive a siege unlike anything they have experienced before. The mountains gradually fade behind you, their blue outlines dissolving into the morning haze as the army descends toward richer lands. Cool streams cross the roads once again. Tall grasses sway beside orchards heavy with fruit. After weeks of harsh country, the landscape almost feels welcoming. Birds return in greater numbers. The breeze carries the scent of wild herbs instead of dry dust. For a little while the journey seems gentler. The relief does not last. Far ahead, rising above fertile fields and winding rivers, stands one of the greatest cities the Crusaders have yet encountered. Its walls stretch farther than the eye expects. Strong towers rise at regular intervals. Broad gates guard every entrance. Behind those defences lies enough food, enough soldiers, and enough determination to resist for many months. This is Antioch. Records confirm that Antioch ranked among the largest and most important cities of the eastern Mediterranean. Whoever controlled it possessed a strategic gateway between Asia Minor and the lands farther south. No serious advance toward Jerusalem could safely ignore such a fortress. The army reaches the outskirts and slowly surrounds as much of the city as possible. Almost. The walls are simply too vast. Too many towers. Too many gates. Too much ground for a single army to seal completely. Your first impression is not fear. It is astonishment. You have seen castles. You have seen fortified towns. Nothing quite compares with this. For a moment it feels as though the city itself has grown from the surrounding mountains, becoming another part of the landscape rather than something built by human hands. The siege begins. Immediately familiar routines return. Campfires appear across open fields. Engineers study the walls. Timber is gathered wherever possible. Messengers ride endlessly between different sectors of the encampment. Every commander understands that this will not be a quick victory. Records confirm that the Crusaders arrived before Antioch in the autumn of 1097. The siege that followed became one of the longest and most difficult episodes of the entire First Crusade. At first, supplies remain adequate. Nearby farmland provides grain. Local villages still contain livestock. Streams offer fresh water. The soldiers remain optimistic. Surely they think no city can resist forever. Then winter approaches. Rain begins falling more frequently. Cold winds sweep through the camps. The pleasant fields slowly transform into muddy ground that clings stubbornly to boots and wagon wheels. Canvas tents leak. Firewood becomes harder to find. Simple tasks suddenly require twice the effort. You notice the smell changing. Fresh grass disappears beneath wet earth. Smoke hangs heavily in damp air. Clothing never seems completely dry. The comfortable camp imagined months earlier no longer exists. One curious footnote appears in several medieval accounts describing how hungry soldiers sometimes searched abandoned vineyards, not for grapes but for snails after heavy rain. Whether this became widespread or remained an isolated practice remains uncertain, yet it illustrates how quickly ordinary sources of food disappeared. The greatest enemy now is not the city, it is scarcity. Food grows steadily more expensive. A loaf of bread costs several times its former value. Horses weaken from inadequate fodder. Some pack animals collapse beneath their burdens. Others are quietly slaughtered to feed the living. No one celebrates such meals. Everyone understands what they represent. Records confirm that famine became severe during the siege. Contemporary accounts repeatedly describe shortages affecting both soldiers and animals. Hunger gradually weakened even experienced warriors. Disease follows hunger. Exhaustion follows disease. Cold nights follow exhaustion. The army begins shrinking without a single major assault upon the walls. You walk through the camp at dawn. Some fires have gone out because no fuel remains. Others burn weakly with damp wood. Faces appear thinner than only weeks before. Armour hangs more loosely upon shoulders. Voices grow quieter. Even laughter becomes rare. Yet remarkably discipline survives. Priests continue holding services. Blacksmiths continue repairing weapons. Engineers continue strengthening siege works. The army refuses to abandon its purpose. Scholars continue debating how close the expedition truly came to complete collapse during these months. Some argue the Crusaders stood only days from failure. Others believe later chroniclers emphasized despair to make eventual success appear even more miraculous. The surviving evidence leaves room for different interpretations. The defenders inside Antioch remain active. Archers patrol the walls. Small groups launch sudden attacks against isolated work parties. Messengers occasionally slip through openings in the incomplete blockade. Supplies still reach the city from certain directions. Every successful delivery prolongs the siege. The crusading leaders know something must change. They organize expeditions into the surrounding countryside searching for grain and livestock. Sometimes these missions succeed. Sometimes they encounter determined enemy resistance. Every wagon returning safely feels like a small victory. One scandalous aside preserved by a later chronicler tells of several hungry soldiers arguing fiercely over a single onion found in an abandoned garden. The dispute reportedly required officers to restore order. Whether every dramatic detail is authentic remains uncertain, but prolonged hunger has always shortened tempers. Winter deepens. Rain occasionally gives way to frost. The cold surprises many Western Europeans who had imagined the Eastern Mediterranean as endlessly warm. Instead, they discover bitter mornings when frozen ground crunches beneath every step. The contrast between expectation and reality becomes impossible to ignore, yet help slowly arrives. Additional crusading contingents reach Antioch after difficult journeys of their own. Fresh soldiers, fresh horses, fresh supplies. Most importantly, fresh hope. The camp begins breathing again. Not fully, not comfortably, but enough to continue. You stand one evening watching countless campfires flicker beneath dark clouds. Beyond them rises the vast silhouette of Antioch. Its towers remain silent. Its walls remain unbroken. Neither side appears close to victory. And yet beneath this uneasy stillness, events are quietly moving towards one of the most astonishing turning points of the entire crusade. Soon the city itself will fall. But almost immediately afterward, the hunters will become the hunted. The greatest trial has not yet begun. The winter camp wakes beneath a sky the colour of pale stone. Frost clings to ropes stretched between worn tents. Thin smoke rises slowly from fires fed with damp branches gathered the previous afternoon. The familiar scent of wet earth mixes with boiling grain and wood ash. Around you, weary soldiers pull stiff boots onto tired feet while horses breathe little clouds into the cold morning air. Months have passed. Antioch still stands. Its towers remain proud. Its walls remain unbroken. The city has become part of everyday life, always visible, always unreachable. You begin noticing how people change during a long siege. At first everyone counts the days. Later they count the weeks. Eventually they stop counting altogether. Routine quietly replaces expectation. The same patrols, the same repairs, the same watch rotations, the same distant walls greeting every sunrise. Records confirm that the siege lasted for many difficult months, placing extraordinary pressure upon both the besieging army and the defenders inside the city. Few medieval campaigns demanded such prolonged endurance from everyone involved. Yet beneath the appearance of stillness, events are quietly shifting. Inside Antioch, supplies also diminish. The defenders remain disciplined, but they cannot ignore the passing seasons forever. Every city depends upon food. Every garrison depends upon morale. No wall, however impressive, can feed itself. Your mind drifts through the crowded streets hidden beyond the massive gates. Families continue ordinary life as best they can. Bread is divided carefully. Water is carried through familiar lanes. Children still play when parents permit it. Craftsmen continue repairing tools. Even during history's greatest sieges, daily life never disappears completely. It simply becomes more careful. One curious footnote preserved by later writers suggests that musicians occasionally performed within the city to encourage weary defenders during especially difficult weeks. Whether these performances occurred regularly remains uncertain, but people throughout history have often turned to music when circumstances became overwhelming. Outside the walls, the crusading leaders search constantly for opportunity. Direct assault still appears too costly. Starvation remains uncertain. Another solution must exist. Then whispers begin moving quietly through the camp. Someone inside the city may be willing to help. The rumour spreads cautiously. No one speaks too loudly. Too much depends upon secrecy. Records confirm that the eventual capture of Antioch involved assistance from an individual connected with one section of the city's defences. Exactly what motivated that decision remains one of the enduring questions surrounding the siege. Some believe personal grievances played the greatest role. Others point toward promises of reward. Still others argue that survival itself became the strongest motivation. Scholars continue examining the surviving accounts, but no complete agreement has emerged regarding every detail of the arrangement. What everyone does agree upon is its enormous importance. Night finally arrives. Clouds drift slowly across the stars. The camp grows unusually quiet. Selected groups of soldiers prepare without drawing attention to themselves. Armour is wrapped where possible to reduce unnecessary noise. Weapons are checked one final time. Every movement is deliberate. For a moment it feels as though even the wind understands the need for silence. You climb slowly through darkness beside men whose breathing sounds louder than usual. Cold stone presses beneath your hands. The wall that resisted for months suddenly feels astonishingly close. Above, only a handful of defenders remain visible. Then everything begins happening at once. A small group gains the top. Others follow. Signals pass quietly through the darkness. Nearby gates are opened from within. Waiting soldiers surge forward before confusion inside the city can fully organize into resistance. Records confirm that the Crusaders succeeded in entering Antioch through a carefully coordinated operation, rather than by smashing their way directly through the strongest fortifications. The city erupts into movement. Church bells, shouted commands, running footsteps, the clatter of weapons striking stone streets. After so many months of waiting, action arrives with breathtaking speed. By sunrise, most of Antioch has changed hands, yet one formidable stronghold within the city continues resisting. Victory feels incomplete. Smoke rises above rooftops. Exhausted soldiers scarcely believe where they stand. The impossible has happened. Antioch has fallen. Relief spreads through the camp. Men embrace companions they feared they might never see again. Priests offer prayers of gratitude. Simple meals taste richer than feasts because hunger has sharpened every sense. One scandalous aside from a later chronicle tells of several starving soldiers becoming so overwhelmed by finally finding well-stocked kitchens that officers had to restore order before supplies could be distributed fairly. Whether every colourful detail is accurate remains uncertain, but months of scarcity rarely disappear politely. The celebration proves painfully brief. Scouts arrive carrying alarming news. A massive relief army is approaching. Not in weeks, not in days. Soon, very soon, the astonishing reversal becomes immediately clear. Yesterday the Crusaders surrounded Antioch. Tomorrow they themselves may be surrounded inside it. Records confirm that a powerful force advanced toward the city shortly after its capture, placing the exhausted Crusaders in one of the most desperate situations of the entire expedition. The mood changes almost instantly. Walls that seemed like trophies yesterday now become desperately needed protection. Food remains scarce. Many horses have already perished. Thousands are exhausted after months of hardship. Some wonder whether survival is still possible. Arguments split along different lines regarding just how desperate morale became during these first days of the new siege. Some historians believe confidence nearly collapsed. Others point out that experienced leaders continued maintaining discipline despite overwhelming pressure. Whatever the precise emotional balance, the situation is undeniably grave. You stand upon the walls at sunset. Outside the city, countless campfires begin appearing across the surrounding plain. One by one, then dozens, then hundreds. Soon the horizon glows with the light of another enormous army. The hunters have indeed become the hunted. The city won through patience, endurance, and quiet courage must now be defended against overwhelming odds. And in the darkest days that follow, an unexpected discovery will transform despair into extraordinary determination. Evening settles gently over Antioch, but there is little peace within its mighty walls. The city that seemed like the reward for months of endurance has become a prison and almost overnight. Beyond every tower, countless enemy campfires flicker across the surrounding hills. They resemble another city made entirely of fire, stretching farther than your eyes can comfortably follow. The air carries unfamiliar sounds. Distant horns echo through the darkness. Watchmen call to one another from high towers. Horses shift uneasily inside crowded courtyards. The scent of fresh bread that briefly returned after the city's capture has almost vanished again, replaced by smoke, damp stone, and anxious anticipation. You realize something unsettling. The walls that once kept enemies out now keep the Crusaders in. Records confirm that the relief army surrounding Antioch greatly outnumbered the exhausted crusading force trapped inside. Months of siege had already weakened the defenders through hunger, disease, and fatigue. Now they faced another campaign without sufficient time to recover. Food immediately becomes the greatest concern once more. The remaining stores are counted carefully. Every loaf receives attention. Every sack of grain matters. No commander can afford waste. Your mind drifts through narrow streets where ordinary routines continue despite extraordinary circumstances. Women collect water from familiar wells. Children whisper instead of shouting. Craftsmen repair broken carts because transport remains essential. Priests comfort frightened families inside quiet churches. Life refuses to stop even while danger surrounds every gate. One curious footnote appears in several medieval narratives describing pet dogs wandering freely through parts of the city during the siege, somehow adapting more easily than the humans around them. Whether the stories are entirely accurate remains uncertain, but they offer a surprisingly gentle glimpse into everyday life amid overwhelming tension. Days pass. The surrounding army strengthens its positions. The Crusaders strengthen theirs. Neither side rushes toward a reckless assault. Patience once again becomes another weapon. Yet patience grows increasingly difficult when hunger returns. Records confirm that conditions inside Antioch deteriorated rapidly. Shortages became severe enough that many soldiers struggled simply to remain healthy enough for guard duty. Faces grow thinner. Armour hangs more loosely. Boots become worn beyond repair. Sleep offers little comfort because tomorrow promises exactly the same uncertainty as today. Then during this season of growing despair, an extraordinary claim begins circulating through the city. A humble man announces that he has experienced repeated visions. According to his account, a sacred relic lies hidden beneath the floor of one of Antioch's churches. At first, many people react with understandable caution. Others become quietly hopeful. Still others dismiss the story entirely. Scholars continue debating this remarkable episode with great enthusiasm. Some argue sincere belief inspired renewed confidence throughout the army. Others suggest psychological necessity encouraged desperate people to embrace hopeful signs. The surviving sources leave room for different interpretations, and the discussion continues even today. The search begins. You stand inside the ancient church as men carefully remove stones from the floor. Hours pass. Nothing appears. More earth is dug away. Still nothing. The atmosphere grows increasingly uncertain. Some observers begin quietly leaving. Others remain convinced that perseverance will be rewarded. Then at last an object is raised from the excavation. Excitement spreads through the gathering almost instantly. Word races across the city faster than any official messenger could travel. People begin speaking with renewed confidence. Prayers become louder. Faces that had reflected only exhaustion now show determination once again. Whether every individual accepts the discovery is another matter. Some remain skeptical. Others become completely convinced. Records confirm that the reported discovery had a profound effect upon morale regardless of modern debate surrounding its authenticity. Contemporary chroniclers repeatedly emphasize the emotional transformation that followed. One scandalous aside preserved by later writers claims that a few outspoken skeptics found themselves suddenly very unpopular among companions eager for hope. Whether those disagreements became as heated as described remains uncertain, but differing opinions almost certainly existed. The military situation, however, remains unchanged. The surrounding army still blocks every major route. Food remains scarce. Enemy numbers remain overwhelming. Faith alone cannot open the gates. Action must eventually follow. The crusading leaders meet repeatedly. Some recommend attempting negotiations. Others argue that waiting guarantees starvation. A bold decision gradually emerges. Rather than remaining trapped, the exhausted army will march out and confront the besieging force directly. To many observers, the plan seems astonishing. How can hungry soldiers challenge a fresher and larger army? Yet remaining behind the walls offers little future. Records confirm that the Crusaders ultimately chose to leave Antioch and fight despite their weakened condition. The decision ranks among the most dramatic moments of the entire First Crusade. Morning arrives. Church bells ring softly through the city. Priests move among the assembled soldiers offering blessings. Weapons are inspected one final time. Helmets are adjusted. Shields lifted. Horses saddled. No one knows whether they will return. For a moment it feels as though the entire city has stopped breathing. Then the gates slowly open. Sunlight pours through the widening entrance. Columns begin moving forward with remarkable discipline. Not hurried, not reckless, simply determined. Outside, the opposing army waits across the plain. Bright banners ripple beneath the morning breeze. Countless helmets catch the rising sun. The field between both forces seems impossibly wide. Your heartbeat feels louder than the distant drums. This battle is not merely about one city. It is about survival. The Crusaders advance steadily. They know retreat offers little hope. They know defeat may end the expedition forever. Yet they continue walking, step after careful step, towards an army that appears far stronger than their own. The outcome of this extraordinary gamble will decide whether Jerusalem remains only a dream or becomes a destination still within reach. The morning sun climbs steadily above the plain as both armies face one another in uneasy silence. A cool breeze moves through the tall grass carrying the scent of crushed herbs, damp earth and smoke drifting from abandoned campfires. Behind you, the walls of Antioch stand firm against the bright sky. Ahead stretches an open battlefield where the future of the entire expedition may soon be decided. For a few remarkable moments, almost nothing happens. Men adjust helmets, horses paw the ground, standards flutter gently above carefully formed ranks. Even the birds seem unusually quiet. Then the stillness finally breaks. Orders pass steadily down the lines. The crusading army advances in disciplined formations despite its exhaustion. Hunger remains a constant companion. Many soldiers have survived months of hardship on little food, yet their marching pace remains surprisingly steady. Every step carries the weight of everything already endured. Records confirm that the crusading commanders organised their forces with considerable care before leaving Antioch. Rather than charging recklessly across the field, they maintained structured formations designed to prevent confusion and preserve discipline. You begin appreciating how much the expedition has changed since leaving Europe. The eager pilgrims who once imagined quick victories have become experienced campaigners. The nobles who once argued over precedents now recognise the necessity of cooperation. The ordinary farmers who had never marched beyond neighbouring villages have learned the rhythms of military life through months of relentless hardship. Experience has become their greatest teacher. Across the plain, the opposing army prepares with equal determination. Mounted warriors spread across the open ground. Infantry gathers beneath colourful banners. Commanders ride from one formation to another giving final instructions. Neither side underestimates the other anymore. For a moment it feels as though the entire landscape is holding its breath. Then the battle begins. Mounted archers ride forward first, releasing waves of arrows before turning away with remarkable speed. The familiar tactic has challenged the Crusaders many times during the campaign, yet now their response is calmer than before. Shields rise together. Infantry maintains formation. The mounted knights resist the temptation to pursue too early. Months of experience have taught painful lessons. One curious footnote preserved in several medieval accounts describes veteran soldiers quietly reminding younger companions not to break formation, no matter how tempting an isolated target might appear. Whether every such exchange occurred exactly as recorded remains uncertain, but battlefield discipline clearly improved as the expedition progressed. The fighting gradually intensifies. Dust rises beneath thousands of hooves. Trumpets echo across the valley. The steady rhythm of marching gives way to the louder sounds of battle. Yet amid all the confusion, the crusading formations remain remarkably organised. Records confirm that disciplined coordination played an essential role in the outcome. Commanders successfully maintained communication despite the enormous pressures of the battlefield. Hour by hour, momentum begins shifting. The Crusaders continue advancing. Enemy attacks become less coordinated. Small successes gradually combine into larger opportunities. No single dramatic moment decides the contest. Instead, determination slowly wears down resistance. You notice something changing among the soldiers around you. Fear has not disappeared. It has simply been replaced by purpose. Every hardship endured during the long siege now seems to strengthen rather than weaken their resolve. The freezing nights, the empty food stores, the endless waiting, the sickness, the uncertainty, all of it has prepared them for this single day. One scandalous aside appears in a later chronicle describing an ambitious knight who supposedly rode so far ahead, seeking personal glory that his companions had to rescue him after he became isolated. Whether the colourful story is entirely authentic remains uncertain, but medieval writers often warned that individual pride could endanger even the strongest army. Gradually, the opposing lines begin losing cohesion. Some mounted units withdraw, others attempt to regroup farther from the battlefield. The Crusaders continue pressing forward with measured confidence. Victory does not arrive as a sudden explosion. It unfolds steadily, almost quietly. Eventually, the relief army begins retreating in earnest. The great siege of Antioch is over. The city is safe. The exhausted defenders who only yesterday feared starvation now stand victorious beyond their own walls. Records confirm that this remarkable victory secured Antioch for the Crusaders and removed one of the greatest immediate threats facing the expedition. Against extraordinary odds, the campaign had survived what many historians regard as its darkest hour. Celebration spreads throughout the city. Church bells ring freely. Campfires burn brighter that evening. Simple meals feel almost luxurious after so many months of deprivation. Laughter absent for so long cautiously returns, yet beneath the relief another challenge quietly emerges. The campaign has succeeded. Now comes the question that no battlefield alone can answer. Who will govern Antioch? Several powerful leaders possess convincing arguments. Some believe promises made earlier should still be honoured. Others point toward the sacrifices their own followers have endured. Still others argue that practical realities have changed since those original agreements. Scholars continue debating the motivations behind the disagreements that followed. Some emphasize genuine political necessity. Others point toward personal ambition, becoming increasingly influential after repeated victories. Whatever the reasons, unity begins showing small cracks. Meetings grow longer. Discussions become more difficult. Decisions arrive more slowly. Time passes while Jerusalem remains far to the south. You stand upon Antioch's walls as evening settles gently across the valley. The battlefield where thousands struggled only days before now appears strangely peaceful beneath the fading sunlight. Grass bends softly in the evening breeze. Birdsong returns. Smoke rises peacefully from cooking fires. Nature quietly resumes its ordinary rhythm. The long road to Jerusalem is open once more. But before the holy city can finally appear upon the horizon, the crusading leaders must overcome not an enemy army, but the growing weight of their own competing ambitions. The next stage of the journey will test unity as severely as any siege. The valley outside Antioch grows quieter with each passing week. Spring slowly replaces the bitter cold that has haunted the long siege. Fresh green shoots push through soil that only recently held abandoned camps and broken wagons. The air carries the scent of flowering herbs, damp earth, and newly cut timber as the city begins recovering from months of hardship. You might expect the expedition to resume immediately. Instead it pauses. Not because the road has disappeared, not because another great enemy blocks the way. The delay comes from within. The crusading leaders, united for so long by immediate necessity, now face questions that victory alone cannot answer. Who should govern Antioch? Who deserves the rewards earned through so much sacrifice? How should earlier promises be honoured after circumstances have changed so dramatically? Records confirm that lengthy negotiations followed the capture and successful defence of Antioch. These discussions delayed the march toward Jerusalem for several months, frustrating many ordinary participants who believed the original purpose of the expedition should remain the highest priority. Your mind drifts through the crowded streets. Markets slowly reopen. Stonemasons repair damaged walls. Blacksmiths replace broken hinges and battered tools instead of constantly repairing weapons. Children laugh more often now. Life cautiously returns. Yet inside halls where commanders gather conversations become increasingly serious. Maps cover wooden tables once again. Messengers arrive carrying reports from distant regions. Every decision seems connected to another. Nothing is simple. Some leaders believe Antioch must remain firmly under Crusader control. Others remind everyone of earlier agreements with the Eastern Roman Emperor. Still others argue that the expedition cannot afford further delays. Arguments unfold respectfully, then less respectfully, then quietly behind closed doors. Scholars continue debating exactly how much these disagreements endangered the entire crusade. Some historians suggest the expedition came surprisingly close to permanent division. Others believe the leaders always intended to continue south despite temporary political disputes. Whatever the truth, time continues passing. One curious footnote preserved in several contemporary accounts describes ordinary soldiers growing increasingly impatient while waiting for decisions they could neither influence nor fully understand. Some reportedly joke that the walls of Antioch were becoming more difficult to leave than they had been to capture. Whether every humorous remark survives accurately is uncertain, but frustration among the rank and file appears genuine. You begin noticing another consequence of the long pause. The army changes. Some men decide they have already fulfilled their vows. A few prepare for the journey home. Others remain behind in newly secured territories. Illness has claimed many. Battle has claimed more. The once enormous expedition has become noticeably smaller. Yet those who remain possess something they lacked when leaving Europe: experience. Nearly every survivor has endured long marches, sieges, hunger, cold, fear, and victory. The inexperienced pilgrims have become seasoned veterans. Records confirm that the army continuing toward Jerusalem was significantly smaller than the force that had first entered Asia Minor. Attrition through battle, disease, desertion, and settlement steadily reduced its numbers throughout the campaign. At last, momentum returns. The decision is made. The march will continue. The city slowly disappears behind the departing columns. Once again, the familiar rhythm takes over. Boots striking dusty roads, wagon wheels turning steadily, harness bells softly ringing, morning prayers before sunrise, evening campfires beneath unfamiliar stars. For a moment it feels as though you have returned to the beginning of the expedition, yet nothing is truly the same. The faces surrounding you carry deeper lines. Armour bears countless repaired dents. Banners appear faded by wind, rain, and relentless sunlight. Even the horses seem wiser somehow. The road south offers new landscapes. Rolling hills overlook fertile valleys. Olive groves stretch across gentle slopes. Stone villages cling to ridges overlooking winding rivers. The Mediterranean occasionally appears as a brilliant band of blue beyond distant cliffs. The beauty surprises many travellers. After months of hardship, peaceful countryside almost feels unreal. One scandalous aside appears in a later chronicle describing several hungry soldiers who became so distracted by ripe fruit hanging in abandoned orchards that officers had to call them back into formation. Whether every amusing detail happened exactly as recorded remains uncertain, but simple pleasures often become irresistible after prolonged deprivation. Unlike earlier stages of the campaign, resistance proves surprisingly limited. Several local rulers choose negotiation instead of open battle. Some towns provide supplies in exchange for peaceful treatment. Others simply avoid confrontation altogether. Practical decisions replace dramatic conflict. Records confirm that diplomacy played a larger role during this phase of the expedition than many popular retellings suggest. Several coastal communities and regional authorities preferred agreements that avoided unnecessary destruction. You begin appreciating another remarkable feature of the journey. The Crusaders are no longer crossing unknown wilderness. They are moving through lands shaped by centuries of trade. Caravans travel familiar routes. Ports connect distant cities. Farmers cultivate terraces carved into hillsides generations earlier. Pilgrims from many regions have walked these roads long before the arrival of armies. The campaign increasingly feels connected to a much older world. Scholars continue discussing how local political divisions influenced the Crusaders' relatively successful advance toward Jerusalem. Some argue regional rivalries weakened coordinated resistance. Others emphasize the careful diplomacy practiced by several crusading leaders. Both explanations probably contributed. As the weeks pass, anticipation quietly grows. Every traveller knows the destination now lies closer than ever before. Conversations around evening fires become different. Less about survival, more about expectation. Some wonder what Jerusalem actually looks like. Others imagine praying at sacred places they have heard about since childhood. A few remain silent, perhaps afraid that disappointment might somehow follow such enormous hope. The evenings themselves grow warmer. Crickets replace the cold silence of winter nights. The scent of olive wood smoke drifts gently across the camps. Stars shine brilliantly above the quiet countryside. Then, one clear morning, scouts return, carrying news that spreads through the marching columns almost faster than the wind itself. The holy city is no longer a distant dream. Soon, very soon, the first glimpse of Jerusalem will appear upon the horizon, and after everything the army has endured, that single moment will become one of the most unforgettable memories of the entire crusade. The morning begins with unusual excitement. Before sunrise, whispers move quietly from one campfire to another. Scouts have returned during the night carrying encouraging news. The destination that has filled prayers, conversations, and dreams for countless months is finally close. No one marches quite the same way anymore. Weariness remains. The heavy armour still presses against tired shoulders. Boots remain worn. Water must still be rationed. Yet every step now carries fresh purpose. The air smells of warm stone, wild thyme and dry grass stirred by a gentle breeze flowing across the hills. Birds circle lazily overhead, while the first sunlight paints distant ridges in soft shades of gold. Then it happens. Someone at the front of the column points toward the horizon. The marching slows. Heads turn. Voices fall silent. There, rising above the surrounding landscape, stands Jerusalem. For a long moment, nobody seems interested in speaking. You simply look. The city appears smaller than many imagined, yet somehow more extraordinary at the same time. Ancient walls embrace tightly packed buildings. Towers rise above rooftops. Sunlight reflects from pale stone that has witnessed generations beyond counting. For a moment, it feels as though every mile of the journey has been leading toward this single view. Records confirm that the crusading army first saw Jerusalem in early June of 1099 after nearly 3 years of campaigning. Many participants reportedly responded with profound emotion upon seeing the city for the first time. Some kneel quietly, others pray. Some embrace companions who survive beside them through hunger battle and endless marches. A few simply stand motionless. Words seem unnecessary. One curious footnote preserved in several medieval narratives describes hardened soldiers openly weeping upon catching their first glimpse of the city. Whether every account reflects literal events or later literary embellishment remains uncertain, yet few historians doubt the emotional significance of the moment. The pause does not last long. Jerusalem is beautiful. It is also heavily defended. The walls appear formidable. Strong towers overlook every approach. The surrounding landscape offers surprisingly little shade. The crusading leaders quickly recognize that admiration alone will not achieve their goal. Preparations begin immediately. The army studies the terrain surrounding the city. Engineers inspect slopes and possible positions for siege equipment. Scouts search for reliable water sources. Supplies are counted once again. Every decision matters. Records confirm that the Crusaders reached Jerusalem with limited resources after years of campaigning. Their army remained determined but lacked many of the advantages normally desired before beginning a major siege. Almost immediately an unexpected challenge emerges. Water. The countryside surrounding Jerusalem offers far less than many travellers had hoped. Nearby streams are limited. Some wells have become unusable. The summer heat grows stronger with every passing day. Your throat feels dry after only a few hours beneath the bright sun. Water carriers become among the busiest people in the entire camp. Every filled container receives careful attention. Every spilled drop feels like a painful loss. One scandalous aside appears in a later chronicle describing arguments between thirsty soldiers over access to a single water cart. Officers reportedly intervened before tempers grew worse. Whether every dramatic exchange occurred exactly as recorded remains uncertain, but shortages often create tensions even among close companions. The surrounding countryside also presents another difficulty. There is not enough timber nearby. Large siege towers cannot simply appear. They must be built. Building them requires enormous quantities of wood. Wood requires transportation. Transportation requires animals already weakened by months of campaigning. Nothing about the coming siege will be easy, yet determination remains remarkably strong. You walk through the camp as work begins. Axes strike timber brought from distant areas. Carpenters shape heavy beams. Ropes are twisted carefully. Iron fittings are repaired. Blacksmiths labour from sunrise until darkness. The army has become a vast construction site. Every skilled craftsman suddenly becomes as valuable as the bravest knight. Records confirm that the Crusaders devoted tremendous effort to constructing siege equipment despite shortages of materials. Their engineers displayed considerable ingenuity under difficult conditions. The defenders inside Jerusalem prepared just as seriously. Archers patrol the walls. Guards strengthen vulnerable positions. Supplies are carefully protected. Watchmen observe every movement outside the city. Both sides understand that decisive events are approaching. Scholars continue debating the precise condition of Jerusalem's defences before the siege. Some historians argue the fortifications had recently been strengthened. Others suggest certain sections remained more vulnerable than later tradition implied. Whatever the exact state of the walls, they presented a formidable obstacle. Days passed beneath the relentless summer sun. The heat settles over everything. Metal helmets become almost painful to touch. Dust covers clothing from morning until evening. Campfires burn lower because fuel remains precious. Simple meals are eaten quickly before work resumes. Despite the hardship, hope continues growing. The siege towers slowly rise. Their wooden frames become taller each day. Watching them take shape feels strangely encouraging. Each beam placed into position represents another step toward the city. Your ears become familiar with new sounds. Saw blades cutting through timber, wooden mallets striking pegs, ropes tightening around massive frames, oxen pulling enormous loads across uneven ground. The ordinary sounds of construction begin replacing the extraordinary sounds of battle. As evening approaches, you climb a nearby hill. Jerusalem glows softly beneath the setting sun. Its pale walls seem almost peaceful. Inside those walls, ordinary families prepare evening meals. Outside, thousands of weary Crusaders prepare for another day of exhausting labour. Both sides know the waiting cannot continue forever. Soon the towers will be complete. Soon the ladders will be ready. Soon patience will give way to action. And when that day arrives, the struggle for Jerusalem will reach its unforgettable climax. Another sunrise washes the hills around Jerusalem with soft golden light. The city walls glow warmly for a few peaceful moments before the day's heat begins building once again. The air carries the scent of dry earth, fresh-cut timber, hot iron and smoke from hundreds of small cooking fires scattered throughout the Crusader camp. Somewhere nearby, an axe bites steadily into wood while carpenters continue their patient work. The waiting is almost over. The great siege towers now dominate the camp. Their wooden frames rise above the surrounding tents like moving fortresses of their own. Thick beams support multiple levels. Protective coverings shield the men who will eventually climb inside. Massive wheels wait beneath their weight, ready for the difficult journey toward the walls. Looking at them, you realize something remarkable. These towers are not simply machines. They represent thousands of hours of labor, every rope twisted by hand, every plank carried across rough ground, every iron nail shaped inside a smoky forge. Records confirm that the Crusaders devoted extraordinary effort to constructing siege equipment, despite severe shortages of nearby timber. Additional materials were gathered from surrounding regions and transported with considerable determination. The commanders know they possess only a narrow opportunity. The summer heat continues draining both people and animals. Supplies remain limited. Enemy relief forces could eventually arrive. Delay now favors the defenders. Action becomes unavoidable. Your mind drifts through the camp on the evening before the assault. Priests move quietly among groups of soldiers offering encouragement. Knights inspect helmets one final time. Archers examine bowstrings with careful hands. Engineers study every wheel and support beam beneath the siege towers. No one wishes to discover a weakness after the attack has begun. One curious footnote appears in several medieval accounts, describing soldiers decorating shields with fresh crosses painted only hours before the assault. Whether every shield receives such attention remains uncertain, but symbols of shared purpose clearly carried enormous emotional importance during these final preparations. As darkness settles across the hills, something unexpected happens. Instead of preparing only for battle, many participants gather for prayer. The long procession moves quietly around the city. Voices remain calm. Torches flicker gently in the warm night air. The atmosphere feels solemn rather than triumphant. Records confirm that religious ceremonies preceded the final assault. Contemporary chroniclers repeatedly describe public acts of devotion intended to strengthen unity before the decisive attack. Morning finally arrives. The signal is given. The enormous siege towers begin moving. It is astonishingly difficult. Hundreds of men pull thick ropes. Others push heavy wheels from behind. The ground is uneven. Loose stones slow every movement. Dust rises beneath countless feet. The great wooden structures creep forward little by little. From the walls above, defenders immediately respond. Arrows descend. Stones crash downward. Every step becomes harder than the last. Yet the towers continue advancing. For a moment it feels as though time itself has slowed. You hear ropes straining, wood creaking under tremendous weight, orders shouted across the battlefield. The steady heartbeat of determination seems louder than every other sound. One scandalous aside, preserved by a later chronicler, tells of several exhausted soldiers arguing over which section of rope should bear the greatest strain while pushing one tower uphill. Officers reportedly settled the matter with remarkable speed before valuable momentum was lost. Whether every colourful detail unfolded exactly that way remains uncertain, but moving such enormous machines demanded perfect cooperation. The defenders fight with equal resolve. Archers release steady volleys. Heavy stones tumble from the battlements. Attempts are made to damage the advancing towers before they reach the walls. Both sides understand that these next few hours may decide everything. Scholars continue debating which specific sections of Jerusalem's defences proved most vulnerable during the final assault. Some researchers emphasize the importance of engineering decisions made by the Crusaders. Others point toward tactical adjustments carried out during the siege itself. The surviving evidence supports several thoughtful interpretations. Gradually, the nearest siege tower reaches the walls. Bridges prepared inside the structure are lowered. A narrow path suddenly connects tower to battlement. The distance that seemed impossible only moments earlier has vanished. The struggle now becomes intensely personal. Small groups move forward. Others follow immediately behind. Every step requires courage. Every foothold matters. Records confirm that crusading forces successfully established positions upon sections of the wall during the decisive assault, creating opportunities that rapidly altered the entire battle. The defenders resist fiercely. For a time, neither side gains a clear advantage. Then momentum begins changing. Additional attackers reach the battlements. Nearby positions become connected. The defensive line slowly weakens. Not everywhere, not all at once, but enough. A gate is eventually opened from within. Waiting forces surge through the entrance. The city can no longer be defended as a single unified position. Victory arrives gradually rather than suddenly. Street by street, tower by tower, courtyard by courtyard. The long campaign that began nearly 3 years earlier reaches its conclusion. You pause for a quiet moment amid the overwhelming activity. The walls that once seemed unreachable now stand beneath your feet. The same morning breeze still moves gently across the hills. The same sunlight warms the ancient stones. Nature remains wonderfully unchanged even as history turns another page. Records confirm that Jerusalem fell to the crusading army in July 1099 after a determined siege lasting several weeks. The capture of the city marked the principal objective of the First Crusade and transformed the political landscape of the region. Exhaustion mixes with relief. Many soldiers kneel in silent prayer. Others embrace companions who survived impossible hardships beside them. Some simply sit against ancient walls too tired to speak. The journey that began with hopeful speeches in distant Europe has finally reached its destination. Yet victory does not end responsibility. Tomorrow, difficult decisions will begin. A city must now be governed. Sacred places must be protected. A fragile future must somehow be built from the echoes of a remarkable campaign. The conquest is complete. The true challenge of preserving it is only beginning. The morning after the capture of Jerusalem feels strangely quiet. The excitement of the assault has faded into a softer rhythm. Sunlight spills across ancient stone streets that have witnessed countless generations before yours. A gentle breeze carries the scent of warm limestone olive oil, wood smoke, and freshly baked bread beginning to emerge once more from surviving ovens. After years of marching, waiting, fighting, and enduring, you finally stand inside the city that inspired the entire expedition. The feeling is difficult to describe. Relief, wonder, exhaustion, gratitude, perhaps all of them at once. Many participants spend long hours visiting places they have imagined since childhood. Others simply sit in silence, allowing the reality of the journey to settle into their hearts. The destination that once seemed impossibly distant now surrounds them on every side. Records confirm that the successful capture of Jerusalem fulfilled the principal objective proclaimed at the beginning of the First Crusade. For many participants, reaching the city represented the completion of a sacred vow made years earlier. Yet history rarely allows long moments of rest. Practical questions arrive almost immediately. Who will govern Jerusalem? Who will organize its defenses? How will food be distributed? Who will repair damaged walls? Who will prepare for the next attack? The city has been captured. It has not yet been secured. Your mind drifts through busy streets where ordinary life slowly begins finding a new rhythm. Carpenters repair broken doors. Stonemasons inspect damaged towers. Water carriers resume familiar routes through narrow lanes. Merchants cautiously reopen small stalls. Animals return to courtyards where silence briefly ruled. Even after extraordinary events, daily life quietly insists upon continuing. One curious footnote preserved in several medieval accounts describes soldiers who, after years of eating simple marching rations, seemed almost overwhelmed by the variety of fresh fruit available in nearby gardens. Whether every colourful description reflects literal events remains uncertain. Yet the contrast between campaign life and settled city life must have been striking. The crusading leaders gather once more. The atmosphere differs from earlier meetings. Victory has settled one great question. Many smaller ones remain. Several respected nobles possess impressive reputations. Some command large followings. Others have demonstrated remarkable leadership throughout the expedition. Choosing a ruler proves more complicated than choosing a battlefield. Records confirm that a leading crusader accepted responsibility for governing Jerusalem, though he deliberately avoided adopting the title of king in the traditional sense. The exact reasoning behind that decision continues attracting scholarly interest. Some historians emphasize humility, others point toward political calculation. Still others suggest both factors influenced the choice. No complete agreement has been reached, but the decision became one of the defining moments following the conquest. You notice another important change. The army itself has become much smaller than when it first departed Europe. Years of campaigning have reduced its numbers dramatically. Some settled along the journey. Some returned home. Many never completed the expedition. Those who remain understand that they cannot rely upon large reserves waiting just beyond the horizon. Every experienced soldier now matters. One scandalous aside appears in a later chronicle describing an argument between several newly appointed officials over responsibility for storing grain inside the city. The disagreement reportedly became so spirited that nearby workers simply continued unloading supplies while waiting for the debate to end. Whether every amusing detail occurred exactly as described remains uncertain, but administration often proves less dramatic than conquest. Outside the walls, another challenge approaches. Reports begin arriving from scouts. Enemy forces are reorganizing. The capture of Jerusalem has not ended the wider conflict. The surrounding region remains uncertain. The new rulers possess little time to celebrate. Records confirm that the Crusaders soon faced another major military challenge after taking the city. Holding Jerusalem required immediate preparation rather than prolonged festivities. Work begins everywhere. Defensive positions are strengthened, weapons repaired, food stores organized, watch schedules established, messengers dispatched to neighboring settlements. The pace feels surprisingly familiar, only the scenery has changed. You walk along the city walls during the cool evening. Below stretches a landscape bathed in golden light. Olive groves shimmer softly beneath the fading sun. Roads disappear toward distant hills where future travellers will continue arriving for generations. Birds glide silently upon the evening air. For a moment it feels as though the world itself has become wonderfully calm, yet experienced veterans know better. Peace often lasts only until the next rider appears carrying urgent news. Scholars continue debating how secure the Crusaders truly felt during these first weeks inside Jerusalem. Some argue confidence remained surprisingly fragile because military resources were limited. Others believe recent victories created stronger optimism than later accounts sometimes suggest. Perhaps both emotions existed together, confidence shaped by caution, relief balanced by responsibility, hope tempered by experience. As night falls, campfires burn less brightly than before. Not because spirits are low, because many soldiers now sleep inside sturdy buildings instead of temporary camps. After years beneath open skies, stone roofs offer unfamiliar comfort. The sounds of the city become your evening companions. Footsteps echo along narrow streets. Distant conversations drift through open windows. A donkey brays somewhere beyond a nearby courtyard. The gentle creak of wooden doors replaces the endless groan of wagon wheels. The long march has ended. A different chapter has begun. Soon another army will approach from the south. Its arrival will determine whether Jerusalem remains in Crusader hands or becomes only a brief and remarkable memory. The final military test of the First Crusade is drawing near, and only after surviving it can the weary expedition truly claim that its extraordinary journey has reached a lasting conclusion. The quiet mornings inside Jerusalem never last very long. As the first sunlight reaches the city walls, watchmen already scan the distant roads, while messengers move quickly through narrow streets carrying fresh reports. The cool air smells of olive wood smoke, warm bread and dew resting briefly upon nearby gardens before the growing heat of the day begins to lift it away. Life is returning, but so is danger. Only days after the city's capture, reliable news spreads through the newly established leadership. A powerful army is advancing from the south. Its purpose is unmistakable. Jerusalem must be recovered. The celebrations become noticeably quieter. Experienced commanders gather once more inside stone halls where maps cover rough wooden tables. Scouts describe enemy movements. Supply officers calculate remaining food. Blacksmiths return to repairing armor rather than household tools. The familiar rhythm of preparation begins again. Records confirm that a large army from Egypt advanced towards Jerusalem soon after its capture. The new rulers understood that holding the city required immediate action rather than prolonged celebration. You begin noticing how different the crusading army appears compared with the force that first departed Europe. Its numbers are smaller. Its leaders know one another far better. Its soldiers have survived years of shared hardship. There is less excitement now, more confidence, more patience, more quiet determination. Every veteran understands that experience cannot guarantee victory. It can, however, reduce unnecessary mistakes. Your mind drifts beyond the city walls. The countryside glows beneath the bright summer sun. Dry grasses ripple across broad plains. Olive trees stand patiently upon rocky hillsides. The sea lies somewhere beyond the western horizon, hidden yet close enough that cool evening breezes occasionally carry a faint trace of salt into the warm air. Scouts continue returning. The enemy is approaching steadily. Waiting inside Jerusalem seems unwise. Allowing another lengthy siege could quickly create shortages. The crusading leaders choose a different course. They will march out and meet the advancing force before it reaches the city. Records confirm that the Crusaders left Jerusalem to confront the approaching army, rather than remaining behind the walls. This decision reflected both strategic necessity and growing confidence after previous victories. One curious footnote preserved in several medieval narratives describes soldiers carefully repairing worn sandals alongside damaged armour before departing. Campaign veterans understood that strong footwear could be almost as valuable as a sharp sword during long marches. Whether every account reflects literal observation remains uncertain, but practical concerns often mattered more than dramatic ones. The army departs once more. The familiar sounds return. Boots striking to dusty roads, harnesses softly clinking, banners lifting in the morning breeze, priests walking quietly among the columns. The road south feels strangely peaceful. Birdsong drifts across open fields. Wildflowers survive in sheltered valleys despite the summer heat. The contrast between nature's calm and human uncertainty becomes impossible to ignore. Eventually the scouts locate the approaching army. Both sides prepare for battle near the coastal plain. The ground is broad enough for large formations. Low hills overlook patches of open grassland. A few scattered trees offer limited shade beneath the increasingly warm sun. For a moment it feels as though the landscape itself has been patiently waiting for this encounter. Records confirm that the decisive engagement took place near Ascalon in August 1099, only weeks after the capture of Jerusalem. It became the final major battle of the First Crusade. The commanders organized their forces carefully. Years of campaigning have taught valuable lessons. Communication remained steady. Formations remain disciplined. No one rushes ahead seeking reckless glory. Every movement reflects experience earned through hardship. Across the field, the opposing army also prepares with confidence. Bright banners ripple in the wind. Mounted troops position themselves carefully. Infantry gathers in ordered ranks. Both sides understand the importance of the coming hours. One scandalous aside from a later chronicle claims that several soldiers briefly mistook a large herd of grazing animals for advancing enemy reinforcements during the dusty early morning light. Whether the amusing story happened exactly that way remains uncertain, but battlefields have always produced moments of confusion before the first clash even begins. Then the advance begins. Not hurried, not chaotic, simply deliberate. The crusading lines move steadily forward. Shields remain close. Spears point ahead. Mounted knights wait patiently for the proper moment. The discipline developed across countless miles of marching now becomes clearly visible. Records confirm that the battle proved shorter than many participants expected. Coordinated attacks and determined leadership helped the Crusaders achieve another important victory, despite facing a formidable opponent. The opposing formations begin yielding ground. Momentum shifts surprisingly quickly. Experienced veterans recognize opportunity and press carefully forward without abandoning cohesion. The long years of campaigning have transformed the expedition into a remarkably effective fighting force. Victory arrives before the heat of the afternoon becomes overwhelming. Relief spreads quietly through the ranks. No one mistakes this success for the end of every future conflict. Yet everyone understands what it means. Jerusalem is secure, at least for now. You stand looking across the peaceful field after the battle has ended. The wind moves gently through tall grasses. Small birds return to branches they abandoned earlier. The sky remains endlessly blue above a landscape that has witnessed another turning point in history. Records confirm that the victory near Ascalon effectively ended the military campaign known as the First Crusade. Although conflicts in the region certainly continued, the principal objective proclaimed years earlier had now been achieved and successfully defended. Scholars continue debating whether additional opportunities might have been pursued immediately after this victory. Some argue the Crusaders could have expanded their gains. Others believe exhaustion, limited resources, and political realities made restraint the wiser course. Whatever the answer, the great expedition has reached its natural conclusion. The surviving participants now face very different choices. Some will remain. Some will return home. All of them carry memories that will shape the rest of their lives. And those memories will soon begin shaping the history of generations yet to come. The roads leaving Jerusalem feel different from the roads that brought you here. The same sun rises above the hills. The same breeze stirs the olive trees. The same birds greet the morning with quiet songs. Yet everything has changed because you have changed. The long expedition has reached its destination. Now every survivor must decide what comes next. Some prepare to remain in the Holy Land, believing their work has only begun. Others dream of seeing familiar villages once again after years of absence. A few simply sit in silence upon the city walls, watching the sunrise without speaking, perhaps wondering how they will ever explain this remarkable journey to people who never left home. Records confirm that many Crusaders returned to Europe after the campaign ended, while others remained behind to help establish and defend the newly founded Crusader states. The expedition did not produce a single shared future but many different paths. Your mind drifts through Jerusalem as ordinary life slowly grows steadier. Markets become busier. Craftsmen reopen workshops. Pilgrims begin arriving once again. The sounds of construction replace the sounds of battle in many neighborhoods. Stonecutters repair damaged buildings. Carpenters strengthen gates. Gardeners tend olive trees that quietly survived every siege. Life, as it so often does, begins knitting itself back together. One curious footnote appears in several medieval accounts describing returning pilgrims collecting tiny stones or small flasks of local earth as keepsakes to carry home. Whether every souvenir truly reached distant Europe remains uncertain, yet the desire to preserve a physical memory of such a life-changing journey feels deeply human. The surviving leaders now face responsibilities very different from those that began the expedition. Winning cities had required courage. Keeping them will require patience. Messengers travel constantly between settlements. Supply routes must remain open. Fortifications demand regular repairs. New arrivals need guidance through unfamiliar lands. Victory you discover is only the beginning of administration. Scholars continue debating how secure the newly established Crusader states truly appeared during these early months. Some historians argue they stood upon surprisingly fragile foundations. Others emphasize the remarkable adaptability shown by their leaders despite limited resources. The evidence supports both caution and admiration. Far away in Europe, news of the success spreads gradually. No rider crosses continents overnight. Letters pass from monastery to monastery. Travellers repeat astonishing stories in village squares. Church bells ring in celebration when reliable reports finally arrive. Many listeners struggle to believe everything they hear. The journey sounds almost impossible. Years of marching, great sieges, distant kingdoms, ancient cities. Against extraordinary odds, the expedition has succeeded. Records confirm that the capture of Jerusalem created enormous excitement throughout much of Latin Christendom. The achievement quickly entered sermons, songs, chronicles, and popular memory, becoming one of the defining events of the medieval world. Not every consequence, however, brings celebration. Political relationships have changed. Trade routes begin evolving. Diplomatic alliances shift. Religious tensions deepen in ways that future generations will continue experiencing for centuries. History rarely grants victories without leaving complicated legacies behind. One scandalous aside preserved by a later chronicler tells of a returning knight whose family scarcely recognized him after years away because his weathered face, long beard, and Eastern style of clothing made him appear almost like a stranger. Whether the tale unfolded exactly that way remains uncertain, but long journeys often transform people more deeply than they realize. You begin thinking about the ordinary participants whose names never entered famous chronicles. The blacksmith who repaired countless horseshoes. The cook who stretched dwindling supplies. The servant who cared faithfully for exhausted animals. The young pilgrim who survived simply by refusing to give up. The widow waiting patiently for news that might never arrive. History often remembers kings and commanders. It quietly depends upon everyone else. Records confirm that medieval campaigns relied upon vast networks of labour beyond the battlefield. Engineers, craftsmen, clergy merchants, labourers, and countless unnamed helpers made the great expedition possible long before victories were recorded. The years following the First Crusade reshape the Eastern Mediterranean. New political communities emerge. Pilgrim routes become more active. Fortresses are strengthened. Merchants discover fresh opportunities for exchange between East and West. Ideas travel alongside goods. Knowledge moves with travellers. Cultures observe one another more closely than before, even during periods of rivalry. Arguments split along different lines regarding the long-term consequences of the First Crusade. Some scholars emphasize expanded commercial connections between Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. Others focus more strongly upon generations of military conflict that followed. Both perspectives illuminate important parts of a much larger historical picture. As evening settles over Jerusalem, the city glows beneath the warm colours of the setting sun. Stone walls reflect soft shades of gold. Swallows dart gracefully through the cooling air. The distant sound of evening prayers drifts gently across quiet rooftops. For a moment everything feels wonderfully still. You remember the muddy roads of Europe, the endless plains of Asia Minor, the freezing winter outside Antioch, the first glimpse of Jerusalem upon the horizon, the towering siege engines, the long marches beneath unfamiliar stars. Every memory now belongs to the same remarkable journey. Soon even these memories will begin passing from one generation to another. Parents will tell children. Monks will copy chronicles. Travellers will repeat stories beside warm fires. Some details will become clearer. Others will grow more legendary. Yet the First Crusade itself will never fade completely from history. Its echoes will continue shaping the medieval world for centuries to come. The years pass quietly now, at least in your imagination. The dust raised by marching armies slowly settles back onto forgotten roads. Grass grows over abandoned campsites. Broken ladders decay beneath the weather. Wagon tracks disappear beneath fresh seasons of rain and sunlight. Nature patiently softens the sharp edges left behind by human ambition. You remain for one last peaceful walk through Jerusalem. The city wakes gently beneath the morning light. Bakers prepare fresh loaves before sunrise. Merchants arrange cloth pottery and spices along familiar streets. Children laugh in narrow courtyards where silence once lingered during the siege. The scent of warm bread mingles with olive oil, fresh herbs, and cool stone still holding the night's gentle chill. Life has found its rhythm again. It always tries. Records confirm that the capture of Jerusalem in 1099 established the First Crusader kingdom and marked the successful conclusion of the First Crusade, although the wider struggle for the region continued through later generations. The expedition achieved its original military objective, but it also opened a much longer chapter in medieval history. Looking back across everything you have witnessed, one truth quietly emerges. The First Crusade was never a story about only one city. It was also a story about ordinary people attempting something they believed impossible. Farmers walked farther than they had ever imagined. Knights crossed continents they scarcely understood. Priests carried hope through seasons of despair. Craftsmen built towers that changed history one beam at a time. Servants cared for exhausted horses that carried entire armies. Countless unnamed people quietly supported every famous victory. One curious footnote survives in later traditions describing elderly veterans who spent the rest of their lives tracing the route to Jerusalem with their fingers whenever younger relatives asked about the expedition. Whether every such family memory truly survived is uncertain, yet it beautifully captures how deeply the journey remained within those who completed it. Your thoughts return to the great moments, the speech that inspired thousands, the eager departures from peaceful villages, the heartbreaking failure of the first unprepared pilgrims, the disciplined march across unfamiliar lands, the first successful siege, the endless thirst beneath the burning sun, the freezing winter outside Antioch, the astonishing reversal when the besiegers became the besieged, the first glimpse of Jerusalem shining upon the horizon, the towering siege engines rolling slowly toward the walls, the final victory. Each memory connects naturally to the next. None exist alone. Scholars continue discussing almost every stage of the First Crusade. They examine motivations, leadership logistics, diplomacy, faith politics, and the reliability of medieval chronicles. Fresh discoveries continue refining our understanding while reminding us that history is rarely as simple as later generations wish it to be. The conversations remain lively because the evidence often allows more than one thoughtful interpretation. Perhaps that is part of history's quiet charm. It invites curiosity instead of certainty. It encourages careful listening instead of hurried judgment. One scandalous aside preserved in a much later medieval story claims that one returning veteran became so accustomed to sleeping beneath open skies that he found the comfort of his own bed strangely unfamiliar for many weeks. Whether the charming tale reflects literal truth or gentle exaggeration remains uncertain, but anyone who has spent years travelling might understand the feeling. You also notice what the expedition changed beyond battlefields. Roads became better known, maps slowly improved, trade expanded along familiar routes, ideas travelled with merchants and pilgrims, architectural styles influenced distant regions, knowledge crossed frontiers together with people. Even where disagreement remained, contact itself transformed the medieval world. Records confirm that the First Crusade influenced political, economic, religious, and cultural developments far beyond the campaign itself. Its consequences echoed across Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean for centuries, shaping diplomacy, commerce, pilgrimage, and warfare alike. As evening returns once more, you climb the city wall one final time. The hills surrounding Jerusalem glow beneath the fading light. Olive trees cast long, peaceful shadows. A gentle breeze cools the warm stones beneath your hands. Birds settle quietly into their nests. The city gradually softens beneath the coming night. You think about every person you met along this remarkable journey. Some famous, most forgotten. Each carried hopes, fears, strengths, doubts, and dreams remarkably similar to our own. Across nearly 1,000 years, their footsteps still seem surprisingly close. History is not only made by extraordinary moments, It is also made by ordinary mornings, shared meals, patient labour, acts of courage that never appear inside grand chronicles, quiet endurance, and perhaps that is the gentlest lesson of all. Even the greatest journeys begin with one careful step. Even the strongest walls eventually become memories. Even the loudest battles fade into silence beneath the passing seasons. Only the stories remain. And tonight you have walked through one of history's most remarkable stories from beginning to end. As our journey gently comes to its close, I hope these quiet hours have carried you not only across medieval landscapes, but also a little farther into the remarkable lives of the people who shape them. If there was one moment that stayed with you the longest, whether it was the first glimpse of Jerusalem, the long winter outside Antioch, or the determination of ordinary pilgrims who refused to give up, I would truly enjoy reading about it in the comments. Your thoughts and reflections help make this community feel like travellers gathered around the same peaceful fire. If you would like to continue exploring the past together, there are many more calming journeys waiting for you here on the channel, each filled with forgotten places, remarkable people and stories that still whisper across the centuries. Until our next adventure, may your evening be peaceful, your rest be deep, and your dreams carry you gently through history.